Story 1. The passenger seatbelt that was always buckled. This happened to me in 2017. At the time, I was 2 years into long-haul trucking. Most of my assignments were overnight runs across the Midwest, isolated highways, frozen rest stops, towns that shut down before 8 p.m. I drove a 2013 Freightliner Cascadia with over 500,000 miles on it. Not glamorous, but it did the job. I'd taken to customizing the interior just a bit. Some stickers, a little seat cushion, nothing flashy. Just enough to make the cab feel like mine. I was running a route from Minnesota to Wyoming that week, about a 13-hour haul, flat stretches of blacktop and not much else. I just pulled off a small service road near the Nebraska border to catch 4 hours of sleep. The lot was completely empty. No other trucks, no other people. Just an unlit rest area with a single lamp flickering over the vending machines. I remember turning off the engine and adjusting my seat back a few clicks. I was parked facing a chain-link fence with prairie beyond it, the kind of view that was supposed to feel open but felt enclosed instead. I unbuckled my seatbelt, leaned my head back, and let the hum of the cooling engine lull me into sleep. I woke up about an hour later. The engine was quiet now, just ticking as it cooled. My eyes adjusted to the dark, and something struck me immediately. The passenger seatbelt was buckled. I didn't register it as a threat at first, just something my brain flagged as wrong. I stared at it, barely blinking, trying to recall if I'd maybe fastened it at some point during the day and just forgotten. But that didn't sit right. I never buckled the passenger side, no reason to. I looked away quickly, as if not seeing it would somehow unmake it. The cab felt tight then, still air, but not cold, not stale, just used, like someone had been breathing beside me. I didn't smell anything, didn't hear anything, nothing moved, but I could feel the presence in that space. My body tensed in a way I couldn't explain, like it knew something I didn't. I didn't look again at the seat. I didn't want to see if it had changed. Instead, I just started the engine and pulled out of the lot without thinking. No GPS check, no coffee, just drive. For a while, I convinced myself maybe I had done it. Maybe I had just buckled it out of boredom, muscle memory. Maybe someone at the last depot had gotten in on that side while I was fueling and left it that way. Maybe. But from then on, I avoided resting in that truck unless I absolutely had to. And when I did, I never looked at the passenger side. I kept my eyes forward. I'd catch myself turning the rear view to just a slightly more limited angle, enough to see the road, but not enough to glimpse the seat. The human brain adapts fast, even to things that shouldn't be there. I started checking the seatbelt every time I got in, unbuckling it if it was fastened, moving it deliberately, loudly, like a warning. Most nights it stayed that way. Most nights. A week later, I was halfway through a delivery toward North Platte. Nothing unusual about the drive. Flat roads, red skies, the usual loneliness. But I'd started to notice something strange inside the cab. A smell. It wasn't body odor, and it wasn't chemical like diesel or plastic. It was older, thicker, like damp cloth left in the trunk of an old car, wet wool, maybe soil. It reminded me of something you'd smell on a coat that hadn't been worn in years, one that had sat in a barn or a crawl space. At first I figured it was something I'd picked up. Maybe a tarp or packing blanket got wet and was tucked under the sleeper, but I checked. Nothing. Every corner of the cab was dry, and the smell didn't fade. In fact, it seemed to gather whenever I stopped. I first noticed this pattern outside Lincoln. I'd pulled into a truck stop to refuel, and the minute I shut the engine off, the air thickened with it. It was like the inside of the truck's side. Not a breeze, not airflow, just pressure. That night, I opened both windows while I slept. Just a crack, enough for the wind to come through and hopefully dry whatever was causing it. It was cold, but I didn't care. I just wanted the smell gone. Next morning, the scent was stronger. It clung to the passenger seat especially. Not the upholstery exactly, the space around it. I hovered my hand there once, just a few inches above the fabric, and the air felt slightly warmer, like body heat left behind. That was the moment something shifted in me. I stopped thinking of it as a smell. It was more like a marker, something that came and went, depending on whether I was moving. As long as the truck was in motion, the air was neutral, clean. But when I stopped, to rest, to fill up, to eat, it would reappear, always faint at first, then heavier, as if it was waiting. I told myself I was just exhausted, that maybe my brain was manifesting something out of boredom, isolation, too many hours behind the wheel. But the fear didn't feel imagined, it felt behavioral. I started adjusting how I parked. I'd reverse against a wall whenever I could, keep one side of the cab visible in a mirror. I didn't even know why I did it, just that it made things feel slightly safer. Then one night, outside a 24-hour diner in Wyoming, I left the truck for 15 minutes to grab coffee and a sandwich. When I came back, the passenger seatbelt was buckled again. The air was still, the smell was fresh, the windows were rolled up, and there was condensation on the inside of the glass. Not mine, just a faint oval, right where a mouth would be if someone had leaned forward to look out. I started asking questions in the most roundabout way I could. Subtle things, when I was stopped at rest stations or chatting with other drivers. You ever feel like the cab gets weird after dark? That kind of thing. Most guys laughed it off. One guy in Kansas said he sometimes heard music at night with no radio on. Another told me he once saw a reflection in the rearview mirror that wasn't his, but none of them described what I was feeling, except one. He was in his 60s, grizzled, quiet. We were both parked off a rural way station in Nebraska during a storm. I'd asked him about road fatigue, and he just looked at me and said, "Ever notice the seatbelt thing?" I froze. He didn't elaborate, just sipped from a foam cup, eyes on the rain. He said, "Sometimes they ride with you, sometimes they wait until you stop." That was it. No drama, no warning, just an observation. That night, I couldn't bring myself to sleep. I sat in the cab with the lights off, watching the rain snake across the windshield. The seatbelt on the passenger side was unbuckled. I'd checked it twice before settling in, but around 2 a.m. I heard the faintest click. That sound, the one you don't think about until it's out of place. A seatbelt locking into place. I didn't look. I couldn't. I just started the engine and drove until daylight. No rest, no stops, just asphalt and panic. When I finally pulled into the next depot, I did something I hadn't done before. I took a utility knife and cut the passenger seatbelt off at the base. The cab felt different immediately. No scent, no pressure, just silence. I didn't tell anyone. I signed the delivery papers, refueled, and kept moving. The next night, I slept for the first time in days. Undisturbed, empty cab, still air. Then, the night after that, I woke up sometime around 3 a.m. to the sound of the buckle clicking shut. There was no belt, but the sound was unmistakable. Click, firm, precise. I never saw anyone, but I replaced the whole seatbelt system the next day. New harness, new latch, just for peace of mind. The following night, parked outside a rest area in Idaho, I checked it before sleeping, unbuckled, loose. When I woke up at dawn, it was buckled again. To this day, I never saw anyone, but I started locking the passenger side door from the inside, even though I knew it didn't matter. Whoever it was, never used the door. Story 2. The rest area where everyone was facing away. This happened to me in 2021. I'd been driving for almost 12 hours straight, hauling refrigerated goods west from Michigan toward Iowa. It was the early side of fall, late enough that the mornings came with frost, but not cold enough yet for snow. I'd planned on stopping at a major rest area just outside Des Moines, one I'd used before. It had decent lighting, a row of vending machines, and usually a few other drivers pulled in, sleeping or eating or just stretching their legs. Enough company to feel safe, not so much to feel crowded. It was just past 2 a.m. when I pulled in. The lot was fuller than usual. 7 trucks, a few cars. Every single space was lined with vehicles facing inward, like some sort of procession. That wasn't the part that struck me, though. What hit me first was the silence. A lot that full should have had sound. Footsteps, engines cooling, radios humming, someone on the phone. But this one didn't. My window was halfway down, and the only thing I heard was wind. When I parked, I saw them. 3 people near the grass strip by the vending area, all standing, all facing away from the lot. That's not totally unusual on its own. Drivers get weird sleep schedules. Sometimes they just need air. But these weren't smoking, weren't moving, weren't even shifting weight. Just standing, still, facing the field, no phones in hand, no conversation. I sat in the cab a while longer than usual, watching, trying to talk myself down from whatever instinct was kicking up in my chest. Eventually, I killed the engine and stepped out. I needed water and something with sugar in it to keep me alert. I didn't look directly at the people as I passed them, but I slowed just slightly, hoping to catch some movement. A glance, a shift of breath, anything, nothing. I kept going. Inside the vending area, the lights flickered a little, probably old wiring, nothing out of the ordinary. But I noticed that everyone else there, 4 people, scattered, was also facing away from the center. One guy leaned against a column, with his head tilted up, eyes closed. Another woman stood with her hands in her pockets, staring at the back wall. No one looked at me. No one acknowledged I was there. That's when I realized I hadn't heard the usual mechanical hum of the machines. I glanced back at them. Lights were on. Options were lit, but the subtle whir of refrigeration was absent. The air felt dead. I reached for the keypad on the snack machine. As I pressed a number, I heard a footstep behind me, a single shuffle. Not a full step, just the drag of a shoe on concrete. I turned quickly. Everyone was still in place. No one looked at me. No one had moved, but I was sure, absolutely sure, I had heard it. The kind of sound that pricks the skin before the brain can catch up. I backed away from the machine, snack forgotten, and walked back toward my truck. As I passed the 3 figures near the grass, I finally let myself glance. Just once. Their eyes were open, all 3, but they weren't looking at anything, not down, not up, just straight ahead, unblinking into the dark. The woman closest to me had a piece of tape on the back of her neck. That's what I remember clearest. A small square of medical tape, like you'd put over a needle mark. I didn't sleep that night. I locked both doors and drove 20 miles further before pulling over behind an abandoned grain depot. No lighting, no people, just open space and a rusted-out barn. It felt safer than the rest stop. I didn't plan on stopping there again. But 4 nights later, I was routed on the same highway, same direction, same timing. And the timing didn't leave me with many options. The next viable rest area was another hour and a half further down, and I wasn't sure I could make it without dozing off at the wheel. So I pulled into the same rest area, just before 2 a.m. This time, only 3 trucks were parked, 1 car, empty on first glance. The vending area lights were still on. I hesitated a long time before getting out. I even talked out loud to myself in the cab, just to break the stillness, to hear something human. Eventually, I stepped out. My plan was quick: grab a drink, get back in, and keep the engine running. As I approached the machines, I noticed something immediately off. The vending glass showed my reflection, but there was more than one. Behind me, not clearly visible but present in the shape, were at least 5 figures, and the lot had only shown 1 car when I arrived. At first, I thought maybe the reflection was picking up double images or distortions in the fluorescent light. But when I moved, just a few steps to the side, the figures stayed where they were. They didn't move with me, they didn't mimic, and one was sitting in mid-air, nothing beneath them. Just cross-legged, motionless, facing the far wall. I turned around fast. There was no one there. The lot was empty. I turned back to the glass. The reflections were still there. Same positions, same poses. But one was different now. A taller figure had turned, just slightly. Not enough to face me, but enough that its shoulder was angled forward. I didn't feel cold. I didn't feel watched. I felt something else entirely, like I'd been placed inside a play, one I hadn't rehearsed for, where everyone else already knew their lines. I stared longer than I should have, trying to decipher what the glass was really showing. Were they people? Was I imagining detail? Then one of the vending machines, the soda unit, released a click, a subtle one, like someone had made a selection. The light inside flickered once. I hadn't touched anything, and when I looked back, the reflections were gone. All of them. Just me, in the glass. I backed away slowly, walked to my truck with a steady pace. No rush, no sprinting. I didn't want to break whatever rhythm I had accidentally aligned myself to. Inside the cab, I locked the doors and looked back toward the vending machines. They were dark now, completely unlit. I started researching on my own time. It felt silly at first, looking up keywords like people standing still at rest areas or reflections wrong vending machine. I didn't find much, just some creepypasta threads and Reddit posts from people asking if they'd seen things while sleep-deprived. But one forum thread stood out, a post titled "The Faceless Congregation, 2 a.m. Pattern," written by someone who claimed to be a rest stop janitor in Oklahoma. He described what he called visual stasis trauma, moments where the brain expects motion but gets none. He said that certain rest areas, especially older ones near interstates, held some sort of emotional architecture, that people standing still in them long enough would start behaving according to some unspoken script. That phrase chilled me. Emotional architecture. Not a haunting, not a curse, just patterns. He described something I couldn't ignore. A group of individuals found standing together, always facing away from the parking lot, never interacting, never speaking. Sometimes they showed up in mirrors. Sometimes they stood in places where no furniture existed. Sometimes they changed positions when no one was looking. He claimed he'd once seen one of them, just one, look toward a departing truck. Always just one. I didn't believe him. Not really. But I bought a rear dash camera the next day. Mounted it to the upper corner of my cab, pointed behind me and set it to record automatically whenever I started driving. I kept my routes normal for a week. No disturbances, no weird stops, no strange reflections. Then I got routed through Iowa again. I didn't plan to stop, but I needed to use the restroom, and the only option within range was, you guessed it, that same rest area. I pulled in just after 2:05 a.m. I didn't exit the vehicle, not even for a moment. I parked for less than 3 minutes, engine on, just long enough to relieve a cramp in my leg and check my messages. Then I drove off, didn't think much of it. That night, I reviewed the dashcam footage on a whim. At first, nothing. Then, in the final frame before I exited the lot, the camera captured a full view of the vending area. 8 figures, standing, all facing away, but one, just one, in the middle, had turned, only partially, head angled, chin just low enough to suggest a gaze. Not toward the machines, not toward the other people, toward the truck, toward me. I paused the footage, zoomed in. The face was blurred, not by resolution, just absent. There were no features, just the shape of a head. It's been nearly 2 years since I've driven through that area, but I still get random rear-view blurs sometimes. Usually nothing, but once in a while, just outside of light range, I see someone standing along the side of the road, facing away, always away, and I never stop. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. Story 3. The route that didn't appear on his logs. This happened in late 2022. I was hauling building materials out of Colorado, eastbound toward Missouri. Nothing unusual about the assignment, no back roads, no time pressure, just a straight shot through flat country with plenty of rest areas and gas stops. I was well rested, not rushing. I'd mapped the route the night before and set my GPS to alert for any unexpected detours. I remember passing through Kansas City just before dusk. After that, it gets pretty quiet. Two-lane highways that stretch into nothing. I was planning to stop for a quick stretch break outside a small place called La Monte. There's a pull-off I've used before, not an official rest area, but wide enough for a rig with a dirt loop that circles back to the highway. You can park for a few minutes and still feel alone. That's what I thought I was doing. It was around 7:40 p.m. when I signaled right and took the gravel pull-off. The headlights caught the usual signage, a faded scenic overlook board that hadn't been updated in decades. I remember the feel of the gravel, deep, loose, crunching under the tires. I drove slowly along the curve, expecting to loop back in under a minute. But the road didn't bend back. It kept going and going. First, I thought maybe they'd done some construction, extended the path, connected it to another access road. Happens sometimes. So I kept driving, waiting for a merge, a U-turn, anything. 10 minutes passed. Still gravel, still no signage, still no shoulder wide enough to reverse without risk. That's when the road started narrowing, subtly, like it was breathing in. The trees pressed closer, but I hadn't noticed trees before. The last I remembered, this was mostly pasture land. I pulled over at a bend and got out to stretch, figuring I could maybe spot a way to turn around ahead. That's when I saw the tire tracks. 2 sets, both mine, one set leading ahead, one set returning, from a direction I hadn't come. I walked to the front of the truck, tracing them with my boots. The tracks weren't fresh, but they were recent enough to still hold the imprint of my tread pattern, a gouge in the left sidewall that left a specific mark in gravel. Same tires, same path. The problem was, I hadn't doubled back. I'd driven in one direction, forward, but the tracks told a different story. It was like I had come here before, turned around and come back again, all without remembering it. I looked around for signs, any landmarks that might explain this, a signpost, a house, a fence. There was nothing, just trees that didn't belong, and a road that no longer felt like it wanted to be left. I got back in the cab and checked my GPS. The screen was blank, not even searching signal, just blank. I pulled up my logs. The route ended near the La Monte cutoff, but there was no record of the turnoff. Nothing about this gravel path, nothing after 7:41 p.m. I should have turned around right then, but there was nowhere to do it. I kept driving. What else could I do? The gravel road was too narrow to turn around safely, and there hadn't been a clear split or shoulder wide enough to risk it. I figured the road would eventually curve back toward the highway. Maybe a farming route, an old access trail. The air was getting colder, no wind, just stillness. I turned off the cab radio. I couldn't stand the noise anymore. It felt like it was irritating something invisible. That's when I saw the cross, a small roadside memorial. White wooden cross, plastic flowers, and a laminated photo stuck into the dirt. It was on the right side of the road, facing away. I slowed instinctively, reading the name, J. Alvarez, 1989 to 2019. A candle, half melted, stood nearby. I don't normally stop at roadside shrines, but I passed this one so slowly I caught every detail. The photo had smudges from rain, the flowers were wilted, dusty, looked like no one had been here in months. I drove on. 10 minutes later, the same cross appeared. Not just a similar one, the same one, same photo, same candle, same flowers. But this time, it was on the left side of the road. I slammed the brakes and got out, walked up to it. Same smudges. Same crease on the lower corner of the photo. It was identical. I looked down the road in both directions. It was flat. No loops, no turnoffs, no intersecting paths that would explain a loop. It didn't make sense. I backed away slowly, got in the truck, and pressed the accelerator more than I should have. I wanted off that road, even if it meant driving until sunrise. I drove another 20 minutes. Then I saw it again. The same memorial. But this time, it was in the center of the road. Just placed there, like a barricade. I stopped the truck and left the engine running. I walked up to it. There were tire marks beside the candle. Mine. I recognized the gouged tread again, left by the same wheel. The tracks came from the left. then looped around the cross and returned down the road I'd just come from. I'd been circling, but I hadn't turned once. The road was flat, no turns, no loops. So either I'd been looping in place, or the road had been reconfiguring itself. I didn't have another word for it. The next morning, I checked myself into a trucker's clinic outside Columbia. I told them I was afraid I'd experienced a microfugue, a form of dissociative state, common in fatigued drivers. They ran the usual neurochecks, heart rate, cognitive response tests. I passed. The attending nurse looked at my logs and GPS tracker. There was a 4-hour gap in the route, from 7:41 p.m. to 11:53 p.m. No movement, no signal, no ignition cycles. Just a blank stretch of missing data. I should have been driving, but according to the system, I'd ceased to exist. I was advised to take a few days off. They chalked it up to exhaustion and possible micro-sleep behavior. Not uncommon. But that's not what scared me. What scared me was what I found when I finally cleaned out my glove box the following week. It was wedged deep in the back behind a folded tarp and a maintenance log, a Polaroid. Not a new one. The edges were faded, the plastic slightly warped. It showed me, in the driver's seat, asleep. Head tilted, eyes closed, hands resting on the wheel. The photo was taken from outside the cab, through the glass. It wasn't a selfie, and I don't own a Polaroid camera. I stared at it for almost 10 minutes. I tried to remember. Maybe it was old. Maybe I'd fallen asleep during a previous haul and someone had snapped it as a prank. But no one would have had access to the cab without waking me. And besides, I wasn't wearing the same jacket in the photo as I was the week before. I was wearing what I'd had on that night, the night of the road. I took it to a buddy of mine, former photographer, now works with image recovery. He confirmed it wasn't a composite, not edited, not faked, just an original Polaroid. He asked where I'd taken it. I told him I didn't remember. I kept driving for another few weeks, avoiding that section of the country, avoiding back roads, avoiding gravel. But sometimes I still feel it, that sense of separation, like my hands are guiding the wheel, but the wheel isn't following the road, like I'm driving, but something else is choosing the route. The GPS works fine, the logs all record, but once in a while I wake up in the cab with the truck already parked. Engine off, seatbelt buckled. And once, just once, I opened the glove box and found a second photo, same as the first, except in this one, my eyes were open, looking straight ahead, but I don't remember taking it. I don't remember waking. And in the photo, there's something behind the glass, a blur, just outside the cab, leaning in. I don't stop on side roads anymore. I just keep driving.